Mark Fletcher couldn't help but smile as he glanced at the framed photo on his desk. It captured a joyous moment from his wedding day, with Samantha radiant in her white dress, her eyes sparkling with love and happiness. They had been so young then, filled with dreams and promises of a future together. Those dreams had become a reality over the past decade. Mark had built a successful career as an architect, his passion for design fueling his rise in the competitive Boston market. Samantha, with her gift for words, had published several acclaimed novels, her writing career blossoming alongside their marriage. As Mark gazed at the photo, he reminisced about the early days of their relationship, when they were inseparable, always finding excuses to spend more time together. Samantha's infectious laughter and quick wit had captured his heart from the moment they met. He remembered the countless hours they spent discussing their hopes and ambitions, their dreams intertwining into a shared vision of a life filled with love and adventure. Little did Mark know that the very foundation of their relationship was built on a lie, a carefully constructed facade that was about to crumble before his eyes. The first crack appeared when Mark noticed a subtle shift in Samantha's behavior. She seemed distracted, her mind constantly wandering during their conversations. The once frequent laughter and teasing banter became increasingly rare, replaced by an air of detachment that Mark couldn't quite understand. Samantha's excuses for working late or attending additional writing seminars started to sound hollow, and Mark couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. He tried to dismiss his suspicions, convincing himself that the demands of her career were simply taking a toll on her. However, the whispers from Samantha's colleagues at the publishing house began to seep into Mark's consciousness. Rumors circulated about her growing closeness with Jeremy Carter, a fellow writer who had recently joined the company. Mark overheard hushed conversations about their frequent meetings, lingering looks, and the undeniable chemistry between them. At first, Mark brushed off the gossip, determined to trust his wife's loyalty and commitment to their marriage. But as the evidence mounted, the once unshakable faith he had in Samantha began to waver, slowly eroding the foundations of their seemingly perfect life together. Little did Mark know that the bitter truth was about to be unveiled, shattering the illusion of happiness he had clung to for so long. The whispers from Samantha's colleagues echoed in Mark's mind, planting seeds of doubt that began to take root. He found himself scrutinizing her every move, desperately searching for clues that might confirm or dispel his growing suspicions. Samantha's late nights at the office became more frequent, and her excuses grew increasingly flimsy. Mark would lie awake in their once shared bed, listening for the sound of her key in the lock, his heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Working on a new chapter, Samantha would mumble as she slipped under the covers, her eyes heavy with fatigue or perhaps something more. Mark yearned to believe her, to cling to the illusion of trust that had once been the bedrock of their relationship. But the nagging doubts persisted, fueled by the guilty expressions that flickered across Samantha's face whenever he probed about her late hours or the elusive writing seminars she claimed to attend. One evening, as Mark waited for Samantha to return from yet another seminar, his phone buzzed with a text from his closest friend, Alex. "Dude, you might want to swing by O'Malley's tonight." A knot formed in Mark's stomach as he read the cryptic message. O'Malley's was a local pub frequented by Samantha's colleagues, and the implication was clear. Something was amiss. Against his better judgment, Mark found himself driving across town, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. He parked a few blocks away, his heart pounding as he approached the dimly lit entrance of the pub. Through the smoky haze, he spotted Alex huddled in a secluded booth, a pained expression etched on his face. Mark slid into the booth, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on, man? What did you see?" Alex hesitated for a moment, his gaze averted as if struggling to find the right words. Finally, He met Mark's eyes, his expression solemn. "I saw Samantha here tonight," he began, his voice laced with regret. "She wasn't alone." Mark's heart sank as Alex described the scene he had witnessed, Samantha laughing and flirting with a man Mark recognized as Jeremy Carter, the same writer whose name had been whispered in hushed tones around the office. As the details poured out, Mark felt a sickening mixture of anger and heartbreak rising within him. The pieces were falling into place, confirming his deepest fears. Samantha was having an affair. Mark's world began to crumble around him as the harsh reality set in. The woman he had loved and trusted with every fiber of his being had betrayed him in the most brutal way imaginable. Numb with disbelief, Mark stumbled out of the pub, his mind reeling from the revelation. He had always prided himself on being a rational, level-headed man, but in that moment, he found himself consumed by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, and a profound sense of betrayal. As he drove home, Mark's thoughts raced, grappling with the idea of confronting Samantha or gathering more evidence of her infidelity. The once solid foundation of their marriage had crumbled, leaving him to question everything he thought he knew about the woman he had vowed to love and cherish. The weeks that followed were a blur of turmoil and heartache for Mark. He found himself in a constant state of internal conflict, torn between the desire to confront Samantha and the fear of shattering the fragile illusion that their marriage still held some semblance of hope. As the days ticked by, the whispers and furtive glances from Samantha's colleagues became more persistent, a constant reminder of the betrayal that lingered beneath the surface. Mark tried to bury himself in his work, seeking solace in the familiar lines and angles of his architectural designs, but even the most intricate blueprints could not drown out the voices in his head. It was during one of these late nights at the office that Mark's world came crashing down around him. He had lost track of time, immersed in the details of a new project, when his phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Dude, you need to get to the lounge right now. Trust me." Mark's heart sank as he read the message, knowing in his gut that it could only mean one thing: Samantha had been spotted with Jeremy again. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and rushed out of the office, his mind racing with a torrent of emotions. The drive to the lounge seemed to stretch into eternity, each red light a cruel reminder of the harsh reality he was about to face. As he pulled into the parking lot, Mark steeled himself for what lay ahead. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, the weight of his suspicions finally becoming too heavy to bear. Stepping into the dimly lit bar, Mark scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on a secluded corner booth. There, nestled in the shadows, sat Samantha and Jeremy, their bodies angled towards each other in an intimate embrace. Mark froze, his breath catching in his throat as he watched the scene unfold. Samantha's hand rested on Jeremy's arm, her fingers tracing gentle patterns on his skin as they leaned in close, whispering and laughing, as if sharing a private joke. The sight was like a dagger to Mark's heart, and in that moment, the last shred of denial he had clung to evaporated. The truth was staring him in the face, undeniable and devastating. Without thinking, Mark strode towards the booth, his jaw clenched and his fists balled at his sides. Samantha's eyes widened in shock as she caught sight of him, her face draining of color. "Mark," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I can explain." But Mark cut her off, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and anguish. "Explain what, Samantha? That you've been lying to me? That you've been sneaking around behind my back with this?" He gestured towards Jeremy, struggling to find the words. Jeremy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed on the tabletop as if willing himself to disappear. "It's not what it looks like," Samantha pleaded, her eyes brimming with tears. "We're just friends." Mark let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Friends?" he spat. "Is that what you call it when you're practically wrapped around each other?" The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of betrayal and broken trust. Mark's heart was pounding in his chest, his world spinning out of control. "Mark, please," Samantha begged, reaching out to touch his arm. "Let's talk about this." But Mark recoiled from her touch, his anger and hurt bubbling over. "Talk about what, Samantha? How you've been carrying on an affair right under my nose. How you've made a mockery of our marriage vows." The other patrons in the bar had grown quiet, their attention drawn to the unfolding drama in the corner booth. Mark could feel their eyes upon him, but in that moment, nothing mattered except the crushing realization that the woman he loved had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. With a final, anguished look at Samantha, Mark turned on his heel and stormed out of the bar, the bitter taste of betrayal lingering on his tongue. The days that followed were a blur of anguish and anger for Mark. He had retreated into a shell of his former self, his once vibrant spirit dimmed by the weight of Samantha's betrayal. Every waking moment was consumed by the images seared into his mind. Samantha and Jeremy, entwined in that intimate embrace, their bodies speaking the truth that her words had tried so desperately to deny. Mark had always prided himself on being a rational man, a man of logic and reason. But now, as he grappled with the devastation of his wife's infidelity, he found himself adrift in a sea of emotions he could scarcely comprehend. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Samantha finally mustered the courage to confront him. Mark heard her footsteps in the hallway, hesitant at first, before she pushed open the door to the study where he had taken refuge. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." Mark didn't turn to face her, his gaze fixed on the empty tumbler in his hand. "Talk about what, Samantha?" he replied, his tone flat and devoid of emotion. Samantha took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation she knew they could no longer avoid. "About what happened at the lounge." "About us." Mark let out a mirthless chuckle, finally turning to meet her gaze. "Us? There is no us anymore, Samantha. Not after what you did." Samantha flinched at the bitterness in his words, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mark, please. Never meant for this to happen. It happened. It just happened." Mark echoed, his voice rising with a mixture of incredulity and fury. "Is that your excuse for cheating on me? For throwing away everything we've built together?" Samantha shook her head, her lips trembling as she fought to find the words. "It's not an excuse, Mark. It's complicated." Mark slammed his fist down on the desk, the sudden outburst startling them both. "Complicated?" he spat. "You want to talk about complicated? Try being the one who has to watch the love of his life betray him in the most gut-wrenching way imaginable." Samantha flinched at the venom in his words, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this." "Well, you did," Mark shot back, his voice thick with emotion. "And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that." The silence that followed was deafening, a chasm of hurt and betrayal stretching between them. Mark could see the guilt etched on Samantha's face, the realization of the devastation she had caused finally sinking in. "I think," Samantha began, her voice trembling, "I think we need to take some time apart, to figure out what we want." Mark nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily upon him. He knew, deep down, that their marriage was beyond repair. The trust they had once shared had been shattered, and the pieces could never be put back together in quite the same way. As Samantha turned and left the study, Mark felt a profound sense of loss wash over him. The woman he had loved with every fiber of his being had become a stranger, and the life they had built together was crumbling around him. In that moment, Mark knew that their journey as husband and wife had reached its end, The only question that remained was whether they could salvage any shred of the love and respect they had once shared, or if the bitter taste of betrayal would forever taint the memories of what they had once cherished. The days that followed Samantha's confession were a whirlwind of emotions for Mark. On the surface, he maintained a stoic facade, burying himself in his work as a means of escape from the turmoil that consumed his personal life. But behind closed doors, the weight of Samantha's betrayal threatened to crush him. As he sat alone in his office, poring over blueprints and schematics, Mark's mind would inevitably drift back to the memories that now taunted him. The tender moments shared with Samantha, the promises of forever that had once seemed so unbreakable. Each recollection felt like a razor-sharp blade, slicing through the fragile remnants of his heart. It was during one of these late nights at the office that Alex paid him an unexpected visit. Mark looked up from his desk, his eyes betraying the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. "Hey, man," Alex said, his voice laced with concern. "How are you holding up?" Mark forced a tight smile, the facade slipping momentarily. "As well as can be expected, I suppose." Alex pulled up a chair, settling in across from Mark's desk. "Have you talked to Samantha since?" His voice trailed off, leaving the question unfinished. Mark shook his head, his jaw tightening at the mention of her name. "No, and honestly, I'm not sure what's left to say." Alex nodded, understanding the depth of Mark's pain. "I'm sorry, bro. I can't even imagine what you're going through." A heavy silence hung between them, the weight of Samantha's betrayal lingering like a suffocating fog. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I keep replaying it all in my head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong." He let out a bitter chuckle. "I thought we had something special, something real." "You did," Alex assured him. "What Samantha did, that's on her, not you." Mark ran a hand through his hair, his expression haunted. "I don't know if I can forgive her, Alex. How do you come back from something like this?" Alex shook his head, his gaze filled with sympathy. "I don't have the answer to that, man. Only you can decide if the marriage is worth fighting for." Mark's mind drifted back to the day he had discovered Samantha's infidelity, the anguish and rage that had consumed him in that moment. He remembered the way his world had shattered, the foundations of his life crumbling beneath his feet. "I loved her, Alex," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I loved her with everything I had, and she threw it all away." Alex reached across the desk, gripping Mark's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. "I know, bro. And I'm sorry." The weight of the decision loomed over Mark, a shadow that threatened to engulf him. Could he find it within himself to forgive Samantha's transgression, to rebuild the trust that had been so callously broken? Or was the damage too severe, the wounds too deep to heal? As the night wore on, Mark found himself pondering the fate of his marriage, the once cherished vows that now felt like hollow echoes of a life he could no longer recognize. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing was clear: the choice he made would shape the course of his life forever. The decision to end his marriage to Samantha was one of the most agonizing choices Mark had ever faced. Despite the pain and betrayal he felt, a part of him still clung to the memories of the love they once shared, the dreams they had woven together like an intricate tapestry. Yet, as the weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that the trust between them had been irreparably shattered. The weight of Samantha's deception hung like a suffocating shroud, tainting every interaction, every shared glance, until the mere sight of her became a reminder of the depths of her betrayal. It was during one of these tense encounters, as they discussed the practicalities of separating their lives, that the raw emotions bubbled to the surface once more. "How could you do this to us, Samantha?" Mark asked, his voice laced with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "After everything we've been through, everything we built together." Samantha's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her expression a portrait of remorse and regret. "I don't know, Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I wish I had an answer that could make sense of it all, but I don't." Mark shook his head, his jaw clenched in an effort to maintain his composure. "That's not good enough, Samantha. You owe me more than that." Samantha nodded, her gaze downcast. "You're right. I don't have an excuse, Mark. I made a choice, a stupid, selfish choice, and now we're both paying the price." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, reminder of the consequences that neither of them could have foreseen. As the process of untangling their lives unfolded, Mark found himself turning inward, seeking solace in the familiar routines of his work. He threw himself into his architectural projects with renewed fervor, pouring his heart and soul into each design, each blueprint serving as a temporary escape from the pain that threatened to consume him. Samantha, on the other hand, withdrew from the world she had once embraced with such enthusiasm. Her writing, once a source of joy and fulfillment, became a constant reminder of the dreams she had shattered, the promises she had broken. It was during one of these solitary nights, as Mark pored over the plans for a new high-rise development, that the weight of his anguish finally came crashing down upon him. He found himself gripping the edges of his desk, his knuckles white with the intensity of his emotions, as the realization of all he had lost washed over him like a tidal wave. Tears streamed down his cheeks, the dam of his carefully constructed facade finally giving way to the torrent of grief and heartbreak he had been holding at bay. In that moment, Mark allowed himself to mourn not just the loss of his marriage, but the loss of the future he had envisioned, the life he had always believed was within his grasp. It was a painful, cathartic release, a purging of the emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. And as the sobs subsided, Mark felt a glimmer of something he had thought long extinguished: hope. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and emotional hurdles that seemed insurmountable. But in that moment of raw vulnerability, Mark realized that he had a choice. He could allow the bitterness of Samantha's betrayal to consume him, or he could use this experience as a catalyst for growth, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of cherishing the relationships that truly matter. As he wiped away the remnants of his tears, Mark felt a newfound sense of determination welling within him. He would rebuild his life, brick by brick, laying the foundations for a future that was no longer tethered to the shattered dreams of his past. It would be a long and arduous journey, but one that he knew he had to embark upon, for his own sake and for the sake of the man he aspired to become. The path to healing was a winding road, fraught with emotional potholes and detours that threatened to derail Mark's progress. There were days when the weight of Samantha's betrayal felt like an anchor, dragging him down into the depths of despair and resentment. On those days, Mark found solace in the familiar routine of his work, losing himself in the intricate details of his architectural designs. Each blueprint, each meticulously crafted rendering, became a testament to his resilience, the tangible reminder that he could create something beautiful from the ashes of his shattered dreams. Yet, even as he poured himself into his professional endeavors, Mark couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of his mind, the one that whispered of the lessons he had learned through this harrowing ordeal. As he sat alone in his office one night, the soft glow of his computer screen casting long shadows across the room, Mark found himself reflecting on the events that had upended his life. He thought about the blind trust he had placed in Samantha, the unwavering faith he had in the sanctity of their marriage vows. It was a humbling realization, one that forced Mark to confront the harsh truth. No matter how deep the love, No relationship is immune to the corrosive effects of deception and betrayal. The foundations upon which he had built his life had crumbled, leaving him to sift through the rubble in search of the pieces worth salvaging. But amid the wreckage, Mark found glimmers of wisdom, hard-won lessons that he knew would shape the man he would become. He learned the value of open communication, of never taking trust for granted, and of cherishing the relationships that truly mattered. As the months passed, Mark found himself seeking out the counsel of those closest to him, friends and family members who had weathered their own storms of heartbreak and betrayal. He listened intently to their stories, drawing strength from their resilience and finding solace in the knowledge that he was not alone on this journey. It was through these shared experiences that Mark began to understand the true depth of the human spirit, the remarkable capacity we all possess to rise from the ashes of our darkest moments and forge a path towards healing and growth. One evening, as Mark sat across from his closest friend, Alex, he found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned, lessons that had been forged in the crucible of his own pain and heartache. "You know, Alex," Mark began, his voice tinged with a newfound wisdom, "I used to think that love was enough, that as long as Samantha and I loved each other, nothing could ever come between us." Alex nodded, understanding etched across his features. "But now," Mark continued, "I realize that love is just the foundation. It's trust, communication, and honesty that truly make a relationship strong. Without those pillars, even the deepest love can crumble." Alex reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on Mark's shoulder. "You've come a long way, bro. I know it hasn't been easy, but you're stronger for it." Mark nodded, his gaze growing distant as he contemplated the next chapter of his life. "I used to think that Samantha's betrayal was the end of the world, but now I realize it was just the beginning of a new journey." Faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, a glimmer of hope shining through the shadows of his past. "I may have lost the dreams I once held dear, but in their place I've gained a deeper understanding of what it truly means to love and to be loved." As he spoke those words, Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders, burden he had carried for far too long. The road ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in months he felt a sense of clarity, a renewed determination to embrace the lessons he had learned and forge a path towards a future that was truly his own. As the dust settled and the echoes of his past faded into the distance, Mark found himself standing at a crossroads, the path ahead shrouded in a haze of uncertainty. The journey through the wreckage of his failed marriage had been arduous, but it had also forged within him a strength he never knew he possessed. With each passing day, Mark felt the weight of Samantha's betrayal growing lighter, the scars of their shared pain becoming badges of honor, reminders of the trials he had overcome and the lessons he had learned along the way. Yet, even as he embraced the newfound wisdom that had been born from his heartache, Mark couldn't help but feel a twinge of remorse for the dreams that had been shattered, the future he had once envisioned slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. It was during one of these contemplative moments that Mark found himself drawn to the familiar comfort of his sketchbook, his pencil gliding across the page as if guided by an unseen force. The lines began to take shape, forming the contours of a design that was both bold and elegant, a fusion of his past and present aspirations. As the concept took form, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through his veins. This design, this creation, would be his statement to the world, a testament to his resilience, a declaration that he had emerged from the ashes of his past, forged anew by the fires of experience. With each stroke of his pencil, Mark poured his heart and soul into the design, infusing it with the hard-won lessons he had learned about trust, communication, and the fragility of love. He crafted each line with a newfound appreciation for the delicate balance between strength and vulnerability, creating a structure that was both imposing and inviting. As the final touches were applied, Mark stepped back to admire his work, a sense of pride and accomplishment swelling within him. This design was more than just a blueprint. It was a symbolic representation of his journey, a physical manifestation of the man he had become. In that moment, Mark knew that he had truly turned a corner, leaving the shadows of his past behind and embracing the possibilities that lay ahead. The road would not be easy, but he felt equipped with the tools and wisdom to navigate its twists and turns, to forge a path that was uniquely his own. As he gathered his sketches and prepared to present his vision to the world, Mark couldn't help but reflect on the question that had plagued him throughout his journey. How does one rebuild trust after it has been shattered? It was a question without a simple answer, a dilemma that had tested the very limits of his resilience and fortitude. But in the end, Mark realized that the true answer lay not in the actions of others, but in the choices he made for himself. Trust, he had learned, was not a finite resource to be hoarded or guarded jealously. It was a living, breathing entity that required constant nurturing and care, a delicate balance between vulnerability and discernment. As he looked towards the future, Mark knew that he would carry the scars of his past with him, but he would also carry the lessons that had been etched into his very soul. He would approach new relationships with a newfound appreciation for open communication and honesty, understanding that true intimacy could only flourish in an environment of mutual trust and respect. And so, as Mark stepped out into the world, his vision in hand and his spirit renewed, he couldn't help but wonder, what defines the strength of a relationship? Is it the depth of love shared between two people, or the unwavering trust and commitment that binds them together through the storms of life? It was a question that he knew would resonate with anyone who had weathered the tempests of heartbreak and betrayal. A reminder that love, in all its forms, was a journey of growth and discovery, a constant evolution that demanded vulnerability, patience, and the courage to forge ahead, even when the path seemed shrouded in darkness. As he embarked on this new chapter of his life, Mark knew that he would carry these questions with him, using them as guideposts on his journey towards a future filled with love, trust, and the promise of new beginnings. And you, dear viewer, have you ever faced a similar ordeal where the foundations of your world were shaken to the ground? How did you weather the storm, and what lessons have you carried with you into the future? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, because it is through sharing stories and perspectives that we can all grow and learn from each other's journey. Remember, the road to healing and growth is never easy, but it is a journey worth taking. Subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and share this video.